The laughing scene in Final Fantasy X is, in my opinion, the single most blown out of proportion scene in video game history. It's constantly ridiculed, called cringy, and bashed on by tons and tons of people. And that is largely due to the fact that the clip that we're accustomed to seeing is taken greatly out of context. Now, most of the Final Fantasy fanbase does understand what the scene was trying to do. However, there are many people in the larger gaming community who still genuinely believe that this scene is terrible, and honestly, I can't blame them at all, because this is how the scene is usually played. This is awful, and if this clip is all you've seen, I can't really blame you for finding this scene an abomination. You probably think that this laugh sounds incredibly awkward and forced. Well, that's because the scene is trying to do just that. It's supposed to be awkward and forced. Now, just so we're clear, I do think that using this scene for humor and general memeing is hilarious, but I also think it's important to understand the entire scene. Let's start with some background information leading up to this infamous laugh. Tidus, the protagonist of Final Fantasy X, is down in the dumps. At the start of the game, his hometown of Zanarkand is attacked by a creature named Sin, and he gets transported to the world of Spira. There's something off about this new world. The people are unfamiliar, the customs are unknown, and according to the locals, Zanarkand has been in ruins for 1,000 years. On top of all that, the people of Spira constantly live in fear of Sin, a creature who terrorizes humans on a daily basis. Tidus is utterly confused and depressed. He doesn't understand the world around him and he wants to go home. Luckily for him, he meets Yuna and her group of guardians. Yuna is a summoner who must embark on a pilgrimage that temporarily gets rid of Sin and brings peace to the land. Her pilgrimage ends at Zanarkand, and as a result, Tidus joins along, both to help the people of Spira and see his hometown of Zanarkand. As they begin their travels, Yuna begins to pick up on Tidus' depressed mood. This leads us to a few moments before the infamous laughing scene. Let's take a look.
You sound sad.
Yeah, maybe.
Want to scream?
I really don't think that's gonna help this time.
You know what? It's embarrassing to say this myself, but summoners and their guardians are kind of like Spira's ray of light. A lot of people in Spira depend on us. I learned to practice smiling when I'm feeling sad, you know. I know it's hard.
Yeah. I understand. I think.
Right. Now let's see what you can do.
Huh?
Come on.
This is weird.
Essentially, Yuna is pushing the idea of fake it till you make it here. She's somebody who's depended on by the people of Spira, somebody the people trust to get rid of Sin and to make their lives easier. This puts a lot of pressure on her, so she actively practices smiling to give hope to other people and also to help herself. But this is not something she does naturally, given by the fact that she has to practice. In this scene, she pushes the idea of smiling onto Tidus, and he forces himself to smile. Since Tidus has not faked a smile before, it looks forced and awkward, just like anybody else who pretends to smile in an unnatural way. Yuna then continues with this idea by telling Tidus to laugh out loud. This is what leads to the infamous clip. Just like the smile, Tidus is faking his laughter as a way to relieve stress. It's not a natural laugh, and it's supposed to sound forced. This is why we get this. One thing that most of the clips conveniently leave out is that the awkward laughing is directly followed up by totally normal laughing. This is how the laughing in this game sounds at literally any other moment, which once again shows that the forced laugh is intentional. I'm saying this because I have literally had people come up to me and ask me whether Final Fantasy X is worth it despite the awful laughing. My answer is yes. The laughing in this game is perfectly normal. Tidus and Yuna's natural laugh after the forced laugh also indicates that Yuna's fake it till you make it idea did in fact work. They're both in a noticeably better mood than they were at the beginning of the scene, and it really solidifies the mood for the rest of the game. Tidus and Yuna renewed and strengthened their resolve to continue on their journey, which is something they needed going forward. Now, there is one more aspect of the scene that I would like to talk about. In the middle of the forced laugh, we get a shot of the rest of the party giving concerned looks. And at the end of the scene, Waka states,
"We were just worried you guys might have gone crazy."
Somehow, these two instances are commonly used as examples on why this is an awful scene. That is absolutely not the case. The fact that the supporting cast is concerned shows that the developers knew exactly what they were doing with this scene. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but the supporting cast wouldn't have been written by a developer to be concerned in this scene unless it was intended for the original scene to be awkward. And if there's still any doubt in your mind about this scene, James Arnold Taylor, the voice actor of Tidus, has said, and I quote, "It was supposed to be an awkward, dumb, goofy laugh." The developers knew what they were trying to do, and I don't think anybody will refute that they succeeded in making the scene awkward. They achieved their goals, which would actually make this scene pretty good. Now, you can certainly not like what they were trying to do with this scene, but that would be more of a matter of personal taste, not an objective fact. So now you might be wondering, well, what's your point? What's the bigger deal here? There are two reasons why I think this matters. The first is that Final Fantasy X is a fantastic game, and some people might get the wrong idea from this scene. There are tons of YouTube videos that feature this scene with millions of views, and it's very frequently clipped. For a lot of people, this is their only exposure to Final Fantasy X. If you haven't played the game yet, or you've only seen this scene, I would highly recommend it. It's one of the best gateway games into JRPGs, and it strikes a perfect balance between gameplay and story. The battle system is still one of the best turn-based systems to date, and the story is very well paced and entertaining, despite a few holes. Ironically, I actually think the voice acting in this game is pretty mediocre by today's standard, but the laughing scene is not a good example of poor voice acting. Here is a much better example.
Hey, but what if something happens? What if the summoner dies?
There's no urgency in Tidus' voice here, despite the fact that he's worried about somebody dying. There's an unnecessary pause between summoner and dies that sounds completely unnatural, and I couldn't even begin to guess what they were trying to do with the ridiculous animations during this clip. And the developers didn't even seem to try to get Tidus' voice to match up with his lip movements. There are much better examples of poor voice acting than the laughing scene. Regardless, Final Fantasy X is still a great game, despite a few flaws, and it's definitely worth checking out. My second point applies to most forms of media, which is that intention and context matter. Whether it's a scene, a video game, or even an entire story arc, I do believe that we can appreciate what a writer is trying to do. It's okay to not like the intention, but that usually doesn't make it bad. Let's take a look at the iconic Dragon Ball Z. One of the most hated arcs in the series is the Great Saiyaman saga. After 7 years of peace, we get an arc about Gohan's day-to-day life as he attends high school and doubles as a wacky superhero, the Great Saiyaman. There's legitimate reasons to dislike this arc. A lot of people disliked the direction that Gohan's character was taken, and some felt like these slower segments broke up the pacing in what's supposed to be a shonen action series. But for every person with a legitimate reason to dislike this arc, there are those who hate it because the Great Saiyaman is lame. Once again, this was the intention. Akira Toriyama was not trying to make a cool, badass character. He's well aware that his hero is lame, as evidenced by the fact that Trunks, Vegeta, Piccolo, and Krillin all make fun of the Great Saiyaman. The Great Saiyaman being lame is the point. He's a joke character, and this arc is the best display of Toriyama's comedy since the Ginyu Saga and early Dragon Ball. It's hilarious seeing Gohan desperately trying to hide his superpowers, whether it be explaining how he travels to school from hundreds of kilometers away, or how he managed to jump hundreds of meters to catch a baseball. We also get some of the best Goten and Trunks moments in the entire series, characters that have now fallen out of favor for newer Saiyans that sell more toys. And of course, we have plenty of Gohan and Videl moments, the only Dragon Ball couple to date where we actually see how the relationship began and developed. The Great Saiyaman Saga is not perfect, but it's one of the only arcs that consistently makes me laugh and puts a smile on my face. One of the main reasons for my enjoyment of the arc is because I appreciated its intention. Another example of a game that highlights the importance of intention is Lollipop Chainsaw on the PS3 and 360. This is an action hack and slash, and it's by no means a perfect game. However, the reviews of the game completely missed the mark, criticizing it for its generic story and cheesy dialogue. But once again, that's the point. Lollipop Chainsaw's narrative is an over-the-top and exaggerated parody of the stereotypical video game plot, which adds a lot to an already funny game. The bottom line is that understanding the intention behind a form of media should be taken into consideration when evaluating it. You may not like the intention, and that's totally fine, but taking the time to understand it can help you appreciate a scene, game, or anime a little bit more. The laughing scene of Final Fantasy X displays this perfectly. An understanding of context and objective turns an awful, awkward mess of a laugh into a scene that's actually pretty good. This scene will always be memed and parodied, and that's great, but let's also not forget the meaning behind it.